Hi, everyone, and welcome to another great week of Honors World Cultures. I wanted to do a Middle Eastern history overview video for you so you get some ideas of where we're going and what are some of the things we're going to be looking at. But one of the most important things I wanted to let you know is that this is our last chapter. So I know some of you are going to be extremely excited about that, but keep in mind, it's my favorite chapter. So we're going to get as much done in as short period of time as we possibly can. So you've already completed your Middle Eastern map activity, and that's how we always start all of our things. So when you take a look at the map, basically you'll see the regions of the Middle East. So generally the Middle East is considered to be everything that is going to be from the Iranian border in the east, across the Arab world, Turkey in the north, and then across North Africa as well. Sometimes you'll see Sudan entered into the Middle East. And that is because Sudan and South Sudan had a civil war a few years back. North Sudan is now just Sudan, and it is an independent country. It is culturally closer to the Middle East than it is to sub-Saharan African cultures in history. And as a result of it, that's why it's kind of included inside the Middle East these days. The other region as well that is also now sometimes included in the Middle East is going to be Afghanistan. Typically, it is because American foreign policy, Middle Eastern foreign policy, has included Afghanistan in that region. But if you look at the culture, if you look at the history, Afghanistan is closer actually to Central Asia or South Asia than actually to the Middle East. All right, next, we're going to take a look at why the Middle East is important. And basically, the Middle East is important because of its location. So the Middle East is going to be extremely important due to its location. Uh, what it is it's in the middle of Europe and is also in the middle of Asia, and that is going to be why it's going to be so important for trade. So you've got maritime trade routes and you got land trade routes. We already talked about the monsoon trading system. That's our maritime route. That's going to be the blue lines all the way on the map. And they're going to basically highlight how goods are going to be traveled over the sea from China into the Middle East, through the Middle East, and then into Europe. And then you'll see on the red on the map is going to be your overland Old Silk Road route, again, from China through the Middle East and then into Europe. Lots and lots of wealth going across the sea and going across the land. And it's not just going to be like when we think of it today as oil being the most important thing. We're talking about salt, we're talking about gold, we're talking about lots of different spices going across. So with all this wealth and with all of these goods, obviously that means the Middle East is going to be an area where a lot of people are going to try to conquer, and that is going to happen over and over and over again. You're going to see lots of different invasions, lots of different power changes, and lots of different territory changes hands inside of the Middle East. All right, another historical important issue of the Middle East is going to be religion. You got our three major monotheistic religions starting inside of the Middle East: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All of them actually are going to be founded within a few hundred miles of each other. Half of the world's populations are now going to be following one of these three religions. So there are religions that have spread outside of the regions to the rest of the world. They are going to be considered to be global faiths. We are going to go through the religions. You actually have already done the importance of religions in the Middle East activity. And it is going to be something that we refer to over and over again throughout this whole entire chapter. I cannot tell you how much religion is going to play a part in future foreign policy and in a ton of wars inside of the Middle East. All right, the next important thing about the Middle East that everyone talks about is oil. You can't underplay the position of oil in the region since the end of World War II. So as you can tell in the pie graph, the Middle East actually accounts for about half of the world's oil reserves, and that's actually what's in the ground today. And that's basically 49% of the world's oil that can be pumped out of the Middle East, which is a ton. So traditionally, that meant that the Middle East had a significant amount of power and significant importance to foreign policy, to control over oil, and access to oil. And that is not the case today. Their importance has started to decrease significantly over the last 10 to 15 years, and that's because we've seen other oil sources coming to play, in particular, North American oil source. The United States now is the world's largest oil producer. It doesn't mean we have the most oil, it means we're producing the most oil. So that is going to downplay the importance of the Middle Eastern foreign policy and in global interactions. However, on the other side of it, you still have other countries that are relying on the Middle East for oil. In particular, you got to take a look at Russia and also of China. So that is why it's still going to be important to the world as a region. China, Russia, Japan, other parts of Asia are relying on Middle Eastern oil to further their productivity and their economic system. So again, traditionally, you have to look at the Middle Eastern oil as being important, and you also have to see that even though they are not the largest oil producer today, they're still impacting what happens outside of the Middle East in terms of oil prices. Middle East also is especially important to us today, and it has been for a long period of time due to, again, oil and also just the central location of the region and the importance to the global economy. The United States has been very, very involved in the region. As you can see, when we get to the history part of it, the U.S. involvement has really increased from the 1960s to 70s. That's when we first started to go to the Middle East. We've always had a considerable number of American troops in the region at any given time. If you would ask anyone in the Middle East who's the most powerful country in the Middle East, the vast majority of people are going to actually answer the United States because our presence is all over this region. It is a central part of the American foreign policy. There's lots of criticism, particularly today, if we should become less dependent on oil from the Middle East and other parts of the world, and also less dependent on China. But again, what you need to take a look at, in which we just studied, Chinese foreign policy is especially going to be taking a look at the Western Pacific as an area that they need to control. And part of the way that they can control that region is by receiving oil, relatively cheap oil from the Middle East. So everyone is trying to say that we need to look, instead of the Middle East, refocus our foreign policy on Europe, Russia, and China, and that the Middle East is really just becoming a second player in these international games. But we really need to remain pretty central in the idea that the Middle East is deeply involved in politics and foreign policy, not just within the region, but in terms of the rest of the world. All right, in terms of what we're going to do, again, you guys have already completed the Middle Eastern map activity. Hope you had fun. That does serve as your map test. It's going to be half the point, so there's 54 questions. It's going to be 27 points in the grade book. And that is going to be, again, your last major geographical assignment for the year. We also are going to take a very short look at the three Middle Eastern religions. You guys already did the religion reading and activity for that. We're going to have some basic history about the monotheistic religions that started there again. You got Judaism, Christianity, and then Islam. Normally, this takes a couple weeks to go through the religions. This is a very, very condensed version. But again, if you've got any questions on religion, please make sure to either ask me in the Google Hangout or you can email me as well. All right, you also completed the people of the Middle East, which is a issue of a little assignment dealing with ethnicity and how these people are going to interplay with the histories and the characteristics of these main ethnic groups. So basically, you have the Arabs, you have the Turks, you have the Persians, you have the Kurds, and then you have the Israelis. And how they interact is going to have a huge impact on the wars that are going to happen in this region, why people still have different viewpoints about who technically owns the land, who doesn't own the land. So this has, again, a large number of impact for the future. All right, we also are going to see that we have lots of different groups that have invaded this region. That was a map. That was a little video. There it goes. There's lots of different groups that are going to invade this region. So I'm going to play your little video. And as you can see, it's going to start here around the Kingdom of Egypt. And then it's going to still start to continue through with all these different ancient groups that have conquered these regions. When you look at these ancient groups that have conquered the regions, you really kind of say, are they truly important? And do they have any meaning to the world today? And they do, because these groups obviously had people that settled there, that lived there. And as each group came and conquered, depending upon if they were, a group that considered themselves to treat conquered people well or nicely, or if they tried to basically exterminate them. You've got all kinds of hatred going on between these ancient groups, people still today from these ancient groups. So basically what you start to see various empires form, various empires conquer each other, and this is going to eventually lead us to various wars throughout the region, even today. So this is still going to be important. There is going to be a written history section that deals with some of these groups, but most of the time it's going to be broken down into four very big eras. There is going to actually be a 100-year anniversary this year because this modern Middle East we kind of consider starts in about 1920. So we're going to start with introductory reading about the different groups of people and how their history play together. And this is then going to be broken down in 30-year time frames. We're then going to take a look at the region as a whole and how it's important to the world and how it is going to be significant with this very large transformations that you see throughout history. These transformations are going to be based upon different dates. So basically, we have the Mandate era, which is going to be from 1920 to 1949. And then after that, we are going to see Arab Nationalist era from 1949 to 1979. And then you're going to have an era that I consider to be the almost Islamist era, which, however, you can also call the American era because we're highly involved during that time period, which is going to be 1979 to 2009. Okay. So those are our basic regions inside the Middle East, our big players and our big time periods. So as we move on into the modern Middle East, which is really going to be 2009 to 2010, we start to see a series of revolutions that are going to spread across the region that are going to be very, very concerning to a lot of different governments. Some of these revolutions are going to be successful, some are not, but it seems like it marks a very major change in this region. As far as the history readings are concerned, they're going to be looking at how the interplay of different groups of people. And there are 5 basic groups of people. You've got your colonial elites, your tribal elites, your secular elites, religious elites, and then normal people. And they're going to have different ideas about all these different, like how they actually deal with the land, who should really rule the land, who should be the leader, and how they should treat their people. There are going to be 16 different Arab countries that we could basically go through, which is going to be pretty confusing if you take a look at all the history of all 16 of them. So we basically are going to start to focus on just a few of them that have some common themes that we see throughout all of the Arab world. So in each era, we're going to be taking a look at Iran and how they're developing. First, Iran is a close friend of the United States, and then Iran eventually becomes public enemy number 1 after 1979. We'll also take a look at the development of Turkey and development of Israel. In particular, for those two, we're going to take a look at what is their relationship with their neighbors and what has been the foundation of that relationship. We'll also take a look at the impact of outside powers in each of the eras as well. The first outside power is going to be the British and the French. Then we'll do the Cold War with the United States and the former Soviet Union. And then after 1979, the Soviets kind of disappear from the scene. And then we have an American era, which will take us pretty much up to the modern day. In terms of other foreign players, we'll see the comeback of the Russians in the Syrian civil war. Some people actually argue that the fact that the United States took so long to actually take action in Syria is what actually led to Russian involvement in the region or return to this region and basically trying to have a great power influx inside of the Middle East that is still seen today. The history will then be presented through a series of readings. It will be a heavy load for a little bit till we get throughout the history part of it. So there's a lot to learn in the 100 years of Middle Eastern history. So what you're going to do is you are going to have the readings. If you take readings, I highly suggest that you take notes on them. And then afterwards, there's going to be a quiz. The quiz can be very tricky. So please make sure you are taking notes. You can use your readings while you're taking the quiz, but it's tricky. So I'll warn you now. So then when we're done with all this, it basically is going to be the end of school. And then we'll take a look at some modern stuff as well. All right, so one of the modern things we're going to take a look at is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, how it developed and what it means to the world and what it means to the region of Palestine today. There's still all kinds of questions about what to do with this land, who should own it, who should control it, and how it should be run. We will also take a look at the larger conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran, how the U.S. and Russia and the rest of the world basically fits into this conflict, and how we can basically try to deal with it. In terms of each of these countries individually, we're going to take a look at their governing form and if their governments really are truly going to be able to survive in the modern era. What is the future of the Ayatollahs in Iran? Are they really maintaining power? Or are the people, and there have been several uprisings and revolts against the Ayatollahs, are they going to be able to maintain their power? Same deal with the ruling family of Saudi Arabia. They are backed by Wasabis. The Wasabis are a version of a terrorist group. Are they going to be